The film, titled Far From the Tree, takes place in the charming town of Karaköy, Turkey. Sinan, who is a recent graduate, comes back to his hometown with the aim of gathering funds to publish his debut novel. A compliment from the local grocer brings him immense joy, making him feel as though he's truly back home. However, out of nowhere, he finds himself unexpectedly splashed with cold water, catching him completely off guard. But just as he was leaving, he found a note on his dad's red sedan saying, "A beautiful woman, a car, is for sale. I owe you money. I'm selling my car, and what's going on in the family?" Soon his father returned, asked his wife if she'd eaten, but both wife and daughter were cold to him. When he saw his son, a college student, return, he smiled uncontrollably and said, I'm sorry. After a short chat, he went to the kitchen for food, probably thinking his debt was paid. But then, scowling, he asked his daughter for a jacket. Though sitting right behind him, he asked his daughter, busy with homework, to get it, saying she ate garlic and her breath smelled bad, full of dislike. "Take a wine bottle and give it to Mom." I knew my father was optimistic and knew how to live, but Sinan couldn't see them as envied by the village. Dad earned little but worked decently. Mom was a good wife and mother. My eldest went to college. My youngest was a good girl, and Grandpa watched the farm. The family was happy, but no one imagined Dad, so decent for years, would get addicted to drugs before retiring. He couldn't ask for money for publishing or loans. The fourth man could never ask his father for publishing money from his childhood, and might even have to repay it. Sinan, a graduate's son, relied on gasoline, but was speechless, even more so without money to pay for it. Grandpa drilled a well on his farm because his father wanted a paradise with sheep and cows. Without money for workers, the three of them did it. Grandpa, despite being old and unwell, worked, while his son, addicted to drugs, held his anger inside. His rage was immense. He saw his foolish son trying to catch a frog. His eyes filled with anger. He kicked the frog and scolded his son, saying, "I don't know, I'm sorry." Grandpa mentioned that he had spent his entire life living here, and he believed he knew where the water was better than Dad. He expressed his dislike for Dad, stating that Dad was a teacher who relied on science to figure out where to dig a well. Sinan sat quietly, observing everything with a sense of irritation and frustration. When Sinan questioned why Grandpa didn't allow his father's dog to guard the chickens, Grandpa replied that the dog was just as useless as his father. Wanting to shift away from this heavy topic, Sinan inquired about the study materials he had left here. After a long silence, he accepted that he couldn't share his family's happiness, despite having many children and grandchildren. He bid farewell to his grandfather and went to deliver something to his grandma, but she kept complaining about his father, who always troubled his grandparents, leaving them in a tough spot. It wasn't the right time to discuss it. He needed to publish his book, hoping its success would help his father pay off debts and resolve issues. But when he approached the mayor for sponsorship, the mayor glanced at the novel and lost interest, instead discussing his contributions to the town and wanting Sinan to write a book, both inside and outside. The content of the article tried to get the mayor's attention, but after a few words, the mayor changed the subject to his visa link. After all the rhetoric, the mayor asked how much money he needed and was told it was only 20,000 lala stones. The mayor said it was not much, but just as he was getting hopeful that something good would happen, the mayor changed his tune and said it would be better if the money was spent on the people's livelihoods. The mayor told him to go and find the owner of the quarry, but the owner didn't know any literature. The mayor told him to find the owner of the quarry, but the owner didn't know anything about literature and wanted to turn his novel into a travel brochure so he could make a fortune. Sinan felt insulted, so he left in droves. But on the way back, a familiar voice woke up some of Bam's bloodthirsty memories, and she stopped to look at a familiar figure standing in the sunlight. The girl smiled like a flower, gazing at nature with stars in her eyes. From her school days, she liked this honest wooden boy who excelled in his studies. Over the years, the boy matured into a man, gaining a touch of maturity and charm. Her eyes, however, now held a hint of melancholy, worn down by life's challenges. The young man, once full of energy, continues toward Minran's intense warmth. The girl adjusted her turban. Her embroidered hair danced with the wind, swirling up into the clouds. There was a time when she had a wild crush on Sinan, but back then, she wasn't focused on her studies. Now, with the wind blowing, she found herself drawn to him, but tears of regret followed. She mentioned leaving for a place filled with gold and silver, and Sinan thought she was kidding. After a pause, the girl forced a smile and spoke of a world where everything had been destroyed, repeating that the world had become a place where all had been lost and ruined. The young woman, serious and not joking, was set to marry a jeweler. Their bond was beauty and wealth, not love. She asked the fourth man if he should marry her, hoping he'd say no. He, proud, didn't congratulate her, leaving her heart shattered. With a passionate kiss, she was left embarrassed, ending her youth unsatisfactorily. The fourth man wiped blood from his lips, and the pain was intense. The girl, however, displayed a slight smile before leaving as her family called for her. Everything seemed so terrible that she felt like blowing it all up. She reached out to her childhood friend, who suggested that the best solution would be to become a civil servant. After careful consideration, she decided to take her friend's advice and began actively preparing for the exam. On the day of the girl's wedding, she dared to watch from a distance, accompanied by two of her childhood friends. Both of them had an intense crush on this girl. Love can be quite amusing at times. The person you love doesn't love you back, and the one who loves you is not the one you love, so ultimately, love succumbs to time and reality. After exchanging a few words about Heidi, the two friends quickly escalated into a fight, even shouting threats to kill each other. Perhaps they both saw each other as rivals, or maybe they simply found themselves in love with no other options. When he got home, he looked at the wounds on his face and thought it was ridiculous. He packed his bags and went to the city to sit for the exams. He had to leave this place as soon as possible to turn his life around, but he didn't have any money to pay for the trip and had to ask his mother for sponsorship. But his father had to give him money for even that. He sent him to the station in a pretentious manner. Then he asked for a smoke and then meatballs. He wanted to ask Samo to give him some money. Unable to resist, he gave him the money, but instead of taking the bus, he followed him secretly. When he realized his father was with his gambling friends, his heart sank. He felt let down that his father, once an intellectual, had sacrificed his dignity to gambling. He promised himself he wouldn't follow that path. The exams ended soon, and he didn't perform well due to poor preparation. He planned to visit the bookstore for study materials for the next exams, but unexpectedly encountered Suleiman, the local writer. Sinan was excited to get Suleiman's advice on writing or publishing, but Suleiman's writing had lost its soul, and he was only interested in earning money. Sinan tried to change his mind, but he immediately got up and left. And only when he's been beaten down by life does he realize that his ideals are worthless in the face of reality. Sinan still wouldn't give up, but he just kept on following Suleiman until he couldn't stand it any longer. Suleiman was a bit helpless. He understood what Semir meant, but not everyone could do something purely for the rest of their lives when writing becomes a job, a hobby, when emotions are turned into tools for profit, and when you can't avoid vulgarity, and he tried to use the country writer as a proof that one can write well even in the midst of hardship, or even that a short letter can quickly become a hit in the literary world, and that's a model for them to follow. But Semir didn't want to learn. But what Cernan didn't realize was that Suleiman was on the verge of collapse in your company. On the way back, someone kept accusing his father of not paying the money, questioning how he could act so casually after causing so much trouble. When his mother asked him about his results, he admitted he hadn't done well and would repeat the year. Although she didn't blame him, her tone showed fatigue. She'd worked hard most of her life, and her husband had suddenly started gambling. She'd waited for her son to graduate, but he couldn't find a job and might have to support himself if he didn't pass next year. What if he failed again and again? When would they turn their family situation around? Yet, she doesn't care and taunts him, saying their family state is due to his parents. At that moment, her mother thought her son was a scumbag, and his father was a piece of shit. But at least his father did his best to help him grow up and never scolded him. His father's present, good or bad, wasn't a reason for Simanon's failure, nor should it justify his past. Her mother also thought that her father's gambling addiction wasn't merely for entertainment. She believed it stemmed from being overwhelmed by the responsibilities of a family with 2 young children. With the teacher's meager salary, providing a happy life for everyone seemed impossible, so he turned to gambling. However, from that moment on, he spiraled deeper into an irreversible life, one that no one else could blame him for except Sinan. Before this, when Sinan noticed $300 missing from his pocket, he held a home court hearing. Although lacking direct evidence, he suspected his father of stealing the money, but his father suggested the maintenance man might have taken it. Nan grew increasingly anxious, as it was the money he'd saved for his book, even though he hadn't considered it before. His father tried to calm the fight, but received only looks of disdain and hatred. As days passed, Sun Nam became an unemployed tourist in town. He visited the market owner again, but the owner never spoke of his sponsorship, only of his own achievements and struggles. Forced to his grandpa's mountain house to find something valuable, he found nothing and went to his grandma's. She was out, so he searched the house recklessly, but like his grandma, he was left with no money. Desperate, he noticed his father's favorite dog and secretly sold it. He took a deep look at it, but still took the money and left. With this money, Sinan finally found a publisher for his book, The Wild Pear Tree. His water and electricity were cut off because he couldn't pay the bills. His mom told him to ask his dad for money at school, but when he got there, his dad ignored him, thinking he was gambling. He teased his dad in front of students for being too easygoing in class. Still, his dad didn't give him money because he had none. Back at school, Sun Nan admired his work. When his mom learned he didn't ask for money, she blamed him for failing such a simple task. Sinan didn't want to argue with his mom anymore, so he wrote a line in his book and handed it to her. She opened it and read, "To my dearest mother, all this is because of you, you alone." Seeing her son succeed, she burst into tears. Before that, even when he had given so much to the family, even a few months after his son's return, the town was full of rumors, some saying that he had studied too much and was a fool, others saying that he would never amount to anything in his life. Every time my mother would fiercely fight with them, no matter how she behaved in front of her son and in front of the outsiders, she always defended him unconditionally. But now that everything had come to a good end and my son had finally become a real writer, and when she talked about her father, she only used the word loser to describe him. Is it because his mother was pursued by so many people, some of them rich? Why did he have to choose his father in the end? Private Boy thought his mother was unreasonable and believed all women had the same magical traits. Some might marry a jeweler for money, others stay with a gambler for advice. But the girl and mother before him made careful choices. Yet Private Boy, though grown, saw the world in black and white. He was pretentious, looking down on everyone in town, men and women alike. At night, when father came home, mother scolded him for gambling at work. For the first time, the playful father got angry with Sinan. He threw something he wrote in class at her. When she opened it, it was a hand-drawn notice for his lost dog. Since the dog was lost, father suffered insomnia and agony, as the dog was the only one who wouldn't abandon him. Sinan felt no remorse or guilt. He thought his father was naive, yet at least he fed the family. Unable to join the civil service or sell his books, he enlisted in the army. Years later, Sinan returned to the town he disliked. By then, his father had borrowed money for gambling, paid off debts with his pension, bought a refrigerator, a hood, and a laptop for his sister. He returned to the countryside, raised goats, and lived well, like a farmer. Everything was better, but the books Sinan had printed were all moldy in the corner. Suleiman, whom he had once despised, wrote books that became more and more successful. Perhaps it was then that he finally realized that books are written for people to read, and that the best books are the ones that the audience likes to see. On a foggy morning, Sinan came to his father in the countryside. When he opened the old hut, there was no one in the warm light, and while waiting for his father, Sinan looked at everything with a trace of caution. Suddenly, he saw a wallet and found a newspaper cut up inside. He opened it and saw that it was the news from the time when he was publishing his book. Sinan's eyes instantly reddened. He had a nightmare at night when he ransomed his father's dog. The well, as Grandpa said, never ran dry. In dreams, there was a tree with a basket and a baby covered in ants. Grandpa once told him the baby was his father, and the ants might have caused his father's delirium. Sinan once believed that, but now he sees his father wasn't insane, just having a tough time. He tried to ease his pain with humor, living like an animal, a hound dog. A lovely farm, some animals, a hound dog, and my father living his dream after years apart. There were no hugs, no warmth, and sometimes even the uncertainty of what to say lingered. Perhaps that was how men had communicated with one another for such a long time. Father mentioned he was going to haul hay, and the four men agreed with a simple yes. On the way, snow covered the ground, transforming the town into a scene from a fairy tale. After they unloaded the hay, the two of them sat beneath the eaves and began to chat naturally. The bitterness of the past seemed to melt away into the snow and was eventually dispersed. Father expressed that he had always wanted to create a paradise, but ultimately, it turned into an old, run-down farm. The well, just as grandfather had predicted, was never going to yield any water at all. All his life he ignored failures, but now he saw them easily. As he gazed out at the snow, he appeared to hold his father responsible for surrendering, for giving up, and for warning him about his future ambitions. His father mentioned that perhaps he'd decide to become a teacher and simply live a peaceful life. But then his father spoke up and quoted a line from Sinan's book, asking, "Have you ever read a book?" It never occurred to him that his father, whom he once despised, was now his sole reader and the only person capable of truly understanding him. At that moment, he realized how much he had gone too far in selling his father's dog. To him, that dog was likely the one being who knew him best. When he harbored many grievances in his heart, that dog was undoubtedly the most loyal listener he could ever have. Even though the book is filled with criticism of his father doesn't get angry at all. He believes it's the thought that leads to criticism, and it's criticism that fosters progress. It's his father's words that bring him a sense of relief. Father would talk endlessly about what he had seen and heard on the farm, using those experiences to derive life lessons. It always seemed to him that it was Father who should have written the book, like a rustic philosopher who, after half a lifetime of ups and downs, had come up with a set of free lessons for life. Perhaps Father had always been this wise, but he had never sat down with him to talk. By the time he woke up, he had no idea where he had gone. When Sinan woke up, didn't know where he had gone either. He was busy filling the sheep with hay when he suddenly heard something coming from the well. A well links two generations. At its bottom lie empty dreams, while outside is harsh reality. Life's burdens led my father to surrender and accept defeat. My son, however, picked up the hoe, aiming to complete his father's unfinished work. Perhaps we all have a personal journey, and if we can't find one, maybe it's ours. The film is inspired by the director's personal experiences. When I began, I always believed I could make a difference in the world. However, reality often feels like a solid wall that shatters my dreams into countless pieces. We might find ourselves disillusioned with the people and things surrounding us, battling the disparity between our dreams and the real world. We may also feel anger and confusion about certain actions of our fathers, much like Sinan does. Yet, it is precisely these struggles and pains that prompt us to reflect upon ourselves, to understand others better, and to gradually learn how to make peace with life. But making peace is not the same as agreeing. It is merely the quiet acceptance of our own helplessness. Our hearts remain filled with questions and inner conflicts, as we repeatedly ponder whether we should be like the wild chestnut tree, solitary, untamed, and without support. Then, instead of sour fruits, compromise, fame, and service, cut away the tattered branches, become poets, performers, and ordinary people, bearing the exhausting fruits of a life lived once. No one can say who's right or wrong. This film is based on the director's true experience. And so, undoubtedly, it is true that Reasonin finally succeeded. And some say that if someone can succeed, then why can't it be you? But in fact, the opposite is also true. As, in the case of his father's dream, where Reasonin finally fell down a well and died, as in the case of his father's dream, For most people, it's not about giving up on dreams, but balancing life and dreams. Live with hope, ensuring dreams are secure. This is the safest path for many. I'm Yendi. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it and look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again. See you soon.